This week on Who Deserves to Be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we look at the case for putting Soundgarden and Oasis into this year's class at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The nominees for this year's class for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame have been announced. The list for this year is as follows: Bad Company, The Black Crowes, Mariah Carey, Chubby Checker, Joe Cocker, Billy Idol with Steve Stevens, Joy Division / New Order, Cyndi Lauper, Maná, Oasis, Outkast, Phish, Soundgarden, and the White Stripes. As they have for the past decade or so, the Hall has a fan vote, which does count towards who gets inducted. Go to vote.rockhall.com to vote. You can vote for up to 7 artists once a day until April 21st. The link to the voting is in the show notes there. That would be the vote.rockhall.com link. This year, we will do what we always do. We'll take a look at the cases for at least 2 nominees per week. We will start this week by taking a look at 2 artists who we've beaten the drum for before, Soundgarden and Oasis. First up, one of the 4 horsemen of the Seattle sound, aka grunge, Soundgarden. As we always do, to the tail of the tape we go. Soundgarden released 6 studio albums, 2 live albums, 6 compilation albums, and 8 extended plays. Of those, their first studio album, which was 1988's Ultra Mega OK, did not chart at all, and their 1989 follow-up, Louder Than Love, went to number 108 on the Billboard Hot 200 Albums chart. Every album after that, though, went top 40, with 1991's Bad Motorfinger peaking at number 39, 1994's Super Unknown going to number 1, 1996's Down on the Upside going to number 2, and 2012's King Animal going to number 5. Their only other album to chart in the top 40 was their 2010 Greatest Hits album called Telephantasm, which hit number 24. Soundgarden also released 24 singles. Of those, 13 hit the top 40 on the American music charts, and of those 13, 10 hit the top 10, with 6 of those 10 going to number 1. The group had hit songs like Spoon Man, Live to Rise, Black Hole Sun, Fell on Black Days, Pretty Noose, Burden in My Hand, Blow Up the Outside World, and My Wave. The songs Outshined and Rusty Cage did not chart at all, but they have over time become hard rock radio station cult favorites and playlist staples. Soundgarden was one of the bands that set the standard for grunge rock. Soundgarden was formed in Seattle, Washington back in 1984. The band's original lineup consisted of Chris Cornell on vocals and guitar, Kim Thayil on guitar, Hiro Yamamoto on bass, and Scott Sundquist on drums. After Sundquist left the band, Matt Cameron became the permanent drummer in 1986. Cameron, for the record, joined Pearl Jam in 1998 as their new drummer and for a while did double duty playing in both bands. If/when Soundgarden finally gets into the Hall of Fame, Cameron will become at that point a 2-time Hall of Famer, having been inducted already for being in Pearl Jam. In 1997, Soundgarden announced that they were breaking up, and then Cornell went on to pursue a solo career and became the lead singer of the group Audioslave, which was made up entirely of the band Rage Against the Machine, except for their lead singer, who was Zach De La Rocha, who had left the band at that time. Soundgarden reformed in 2010 and released a new album called King Animal in 2012, but then on May 18, 2017, Chris Cornell passed away from mental health issues, ending the band as we know it today. Soundgarden helped to shape the sound of alternative rock for decades to come. They were voted the 14th greatest band on VH1's Greatest Hard Rock Bands of All Time list. They were nominated for 9 Grammy Awards, winning 2 of them. They were the first of the 4 horsemen of grunge, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, and Soundgarden, to actually sign a record deal, even though they were not the first to break through to the mainstream. That honor, of course, goes to Nirvana with Smells Like Teen Spirit and the album Nevermind. They were, however, as influential due to their songwriting style, especially with their use of time signatures and Chris Cornell's voice. And Chris's voice is what really set them apart from the other Seattle bands, and he is a huge reason why they should be finally inducted, God willing. Chris Cornell was a part of either your parents' childhoods or your grandparents' childhoods in some cases, or at least their misspent 20s. To me and a lot of other people, he was, simply put, one of the greatest rock singers who ever lived. Heavy Metal Magazine put him at number 4, Rolling Stone put him at number 9, while MTV put him at number 12 in music regardless of the genre. The man had a 4-octave range and he used every single bit of it. As an example, listen to the song Hunger Strike that he did with Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam for the Temple of the Dog project. While I take absolutely nothing away from Eddie being a huge Pearl Jam fan myself and having seen the band 4 times in concert now, he and Chris had different singing styles. Eddie brought intensity to his singing. Chris brought sheer, unadulterated power. The man could just flat out sing. He was also a really good songwriter, which is something that I do not think that he gets enough credit for. His death leaves Eddie Vedder as the last of the original grunge frontmen still alive, after the untimely deaths of Andrew Wood of Mother Love Bone, which was the first grunge band, if you want to call it that, Kurt Cobain of Nirvana, Lane Staley of Alice in Chains, and of course now Chris. I am not counting the Foo Fighters as a grunge rock band, by the way. They were just a hard rock band that came out of Nirvana's untimely breakup. Now, if you want to get more into Soundgarden's music, then a great place to start is their greatest hits album, Telephantasm. Then I would absolutely get at least Super Unknown and Bad Motorfinger, which were their 2 biggest selling albums and their 2 albums to really break through into the mainstream. Soundgarden have been eligible for the Hall since 2012 and have been nominated for induction 3 different times now, 2020, 2023, and 2025. Hopefully, this is the year that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame shows Soundgarden the respect that they deserve and finally puts them into the Hall. Next up, let us look at the case for Manchester, England's most dysfunctional sibling group, Oasis, to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And of course, as we did before, back to the tail of the tape we go. Oasis released 7 studio albums, 2 live albums, 5 compilation albums, and 1 EP, with, of course, rumors of a new album coming out in 2025. Of those, 6 hit the top 40 in America, with 3 of those 6 going top 10. In the United Kingdom, things were slightly different. 14 of their albums went top 40, with 12 of the 14 going top 10, with 8 of those 12 going to number 1, those being their 2010 album Time Flies and every single one of their studio albums. They also released 30 singles. Of those, only 1995's Wonderwall hit the top 40 in America, finally topping out at number 8. In the UK, again, different story. 26 hit the top 40, with 21 of those 26 hitting the top 10, including 8 of those 21 going to number 1. Worldwide, their albums sold over 80 million copies, with all of their studio albums going platinum and multi-platinum. They were nominated for 3 Grammy Awards, winning none of them. In Britain, though, they were kings. They were nominated for 17 Brit Awards, winning 6 of them. Worldwide, they've received 90 award nominations, winning exactly half of them. While grunge ruled American music in the 90s, Oasis ruled Britannia. The group was one of the most influential groups coming out of England, and they still influence groups to this day, including groups like the Arctic Monkeys. And while the brothers Gallagher might not have gotten along, to be very nice about it, they sure put out some great music, with albums such as Definitely Maybe, What's the Story, Morning Glory, and Be Here Now, and songs like Wonderwall, Live Forever, Cigarettes and Alcohol, Supersonic, Rock and Roll Star and Don't Look Back in Anger, their place in music history is pretty well solidified. The only knock against Oasis not being inducted for all this time that I can see is that they didn't sell as well in America as they did in the rest of the world. While Wonderwall is now a staple at EDM festivals and DJ sets to get the crowd singing before they just completely destroy the song in some stupid, crappy EDM remix, Looking at You, I'm not even going to mention the names. Wonderwall was one of the group's few songs to make the pop charts in the U.S. The band did much better on the Billboard Alternative Music charts and the British charts, where most of their singles were top 5 staples. Regardless, though, the band was on the shortlist for induction a couple of years ago, but came up short. Hopefully, this is the year that they get put in because they do deserve to be inducted. I'm not quite sure that the band will show up to accept the award, even with the Brothers Gallagher reuniting. Knowing that sibling rivalry, I'm not even sure they're going to make it through their reunion concerts in England this year. Like I said before, the Hall has a fan vote, which does count towards who gets inducted. Go to vote.rockhall.com to vote. You can, as I said before, vote for up to 7 different artists once a day until April 21st. The link to the voting is in the show notes. And next week, we will take a look at 2 more artists who we've beaten the drum for before, the White Stripes and Joe Cocker. And that is it for who deserves to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We also invite you to check out our other podcast, the Music History Today podcast, where we go over what happened on that date in music history. That podcast drops daily, including weekends, on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. We also have the Music History In-Depth podcast, where we go more in-depth into the events that happened for that week in music history. And that podcast posts every Tuesday on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. Thank you very, very much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube or Spotify.